Hello, everyone. My name is Dan Armstrong. I'm the Corporate Communications Specialist at Covenant Eyes, and we have a very special guest today. It is our pleasure to welcome Dr. Emerson Eggerichs to our Covenant Eyes Facebook Live segment today. He has a lot of tremendous resources that we'd like to make you aware of, and the best place to go for that is loveandrespect.com. He'd authored the best-selling book, Love and Respect. There at that website, loveandrespect.com, you'll find podcasts, videos, upcoming events. You'll find books and much more there. Dr. Eggerichs is an internationally known public speaker on the topic of marriage, parenting, communication, and more, based on more than 3 decades of counseling as well as scientific and biblical research. He's developed Love and Respect marriage conferences, which he presents to live audiences around the country and most recently around the world. He just got back a little while ago from Europe. He's spoken to NFL owners and coaches, PGA players and their spouses. He also was invited by the military to speak to the troops in Iraq. He's authored 14 books, including New York Times bestseller, Love and Respect, which is platinum and Book of the Year award winner, selling more than 1.6 million copies. This is his 45th. He's almost on his 45th anniversary of his marriage to his wife, Sarah. They have 3 adult children. Dr. Eggerichs, it is such a pleasure to have you today. Welcome.
Thank you, Dan. Been looking forward to it. Appreciate that introduction. That's kind.
No problem. And also from the great state of Michigan, coming to us from Grand Rapids today.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. Where if you're not Dutch, you're not much.
That's right. That's good stuff. So let's get right into it, Dr. Eggerichs. I know that you just got back from Europe presenting a lot of this material. And one of your most recent books, The 4 Wills of God, 2 chapters are specifically dedicated to sexual sin. And when it comes to this, what do you tell people is God's will concerning their lives and sexual sin? I think a lot of people look at God's will as very much an abstract thing. I have to find this thing. Boy, wouldn't it be great if there was literal writing on the wall when it comes to God's will? And you speak specifically to things that we at Covenant Eyes talk to regarding sexual sin. Can you summarize a little bit about what you say in that book regarding that topic?
Well, I've been addressing these 4 passages in the New Testament for nearly 40 years, particularly as a pastor. And it's exciting because there are those 4 texts that say this is the will of God. We know there's more to the will of God than these 4 concepts. But as I say, if I ignore these 4, I'll probably ignore the rest. But what's exciting is that the Lord has revealed these things, and it's kind of like he's highlighted it in gold and said, hey, start here. And if you start here with my universal wills, if you do these 4 things, you follow these 4 things, and none of us will do it perfectly, but if our heart's in the right place, we're committed to that, it triggers what I call our experience of the unique will of God. This is based on a principle that John the Apostle said in 1 John 3:22. In whatever we ask of him, we receive from him because we keep his commandments and do the things that are pleasing in his sight. In other words, when we respond to God's heart, what he's already revealed to us, then he begins to respond to the desires of our heart. And that's a very meaningful thing. And in particular, on the moral purity issue, Jesus said that we won't see God apart from being pure in heart. The pure in heart will see God. So each of us comes to a point where we have to make a decision. Will I align myself with what I understand Christ to be saying there, with a sense and confidence that I'm going to begin to experience and encounter the Lord in my life? And all of us have to make a decision. At one level, there's a price to pay. You know, there is this commitment that we have to make to figure out where it is that moral impurity is going to control me. But once we make that decision, then we need to have a sense of anticipation that God, in fact, will use us because we're touching his heart.
I think it's interesting how this idea of sexual temptation is both the Old Testament and the New Testament, and it's handled similarly but also different, because we saw in the Old Testament where with Potiphar's wife there was a physical running away from a physical person because of the sexual temptation. Then we see in the New Testament with Christ talking about, you've heard of old, if you lust upon a woman, but now I tell you, or actually if you have immorality, that's wrong, but when you lust in your heart, you've committed this already. It seems like that temptation becomes even more increased in this world where you can find pornography on any internet-able device.
Well, and I think Jesus is reflecting the intent of the Old Testament anyway. It wasn't just the fact that you didn't commit adultery physically. The fact is, if you look upon a woman and lust for her, you've already committed adultery in your their heart. And I think that's always been God's intent and our understanding. And I think all of us know that. But I think the challenge for us at this point in this culture, and this is one of the challenges I extend to men in particular, there are two challenges for all believers: trials and temptations. And there are many in the persecuted country who are faithful unto death. And I think some of us think, I wonder if I would be faithful unto death. I love Christ enough that I would be faithful even to the point of end. One point I make is you can tell very quickly whether you be faithful by how you're dealing with temptations. I think the challenge for us is to think about this. There are people who have come from persecuted countries who were really faithful, but they had a difficult time handling the temptations once they were here. No easy issue. And so one of my challenge I extend to men in particular, you're a man of honor who I believe God has called you for a significant purpose. But if you don't come to grips with this struggle of temptation and beat it and win, you won't be used of God in the way that I believe you long for deep in your heart. But if you do become victorious over this, you need to see this is no small issue. You are demonstrating a deep, profound maturity and faithfulness to Christ, and he will honor you. I think many of us have just, mourned the death of Billy Graham, but he walked in purity. Everybody who knew him. And I believe that the Lord used him in significant ways because he found in Billy a man that he could trust.
We deal a lot with people, mostly men who are married and deal with this sexual temptation. Throughout your years, decades of experience in counseling, what are some of the common temptations when it comes to specifically men who are in a marriage relationship? What are the struggles between both the men and women that you deal with?
Well, I think to your point, we had a pornographic epidemic, the conflict away from incredible temptation, and that's unlike any other time in some ways, as you pointed out. The pornography issue, as we were talking off earlier, across Europe and around the Western Hemisphere, is epidemic, and the percentage of people who are involved in this is extraordinary. It's overwhelming to all of us, and one of the challenges I extended, all of us are going to have to decide on my watch, which decision am I going to make? I recently spoke at a mega church in Colorado, and the senior pastor got up afterwards and said, I remember the day and the hour that I said no to pornography in my life. But it isn't saying no to something as much as it is saying yes to God's will and purpose for my life and having a hunger to be his vessel, fit for his purposes. But the pornography issue is the number one issue for the married and even the unmarried. Obviously, we have office romances. We have what we all understand to be those kinds of temptations. But the one that can be done in secret without anybody else and you think you're going to get away with would be the pornographic issue. But as I point out, the digital, I wrote another book called Before You Hit Sin, and that's dealing with the digital footprint that is out there. You cannot in any way believe that your footprint isn't being recorded somewhere. And one of my concerns is that there's going to be this mass exposure to many godly, otherwise godly men, and the humiliation. And so you have to realize you're not getting away with anything. And particularly because we have an audience of one. Our Heavenly Father loves us. He calls us to do this, but we have to make that decision. And if we are at a point where we feel like I can't overcome this, then we need to learn from Alcoholics Anonymous. And they say, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. And once addicted to porn, always addicted to porn. So one has to get up every day to make a decision that I'm not going to drink. And one has to make a decision every day when you get up that I'm not going to put myself in a position where I'm going to give into this. This is an intense desire. Lust is an overwhelming reality. But the man of God in particular who has come to that point where they said, you know what? The Lord's will for my life and my purpose, my sense that he called me. And many men will say to me, I know the Lord spoke to me as a young man about his purpose. I have this deep sense that he wanted to use me, but I would have to confess that this is the one thing that's undermining that. And I've had men say to me, you know what? I try to walk in integrity in every area of my life. I try to be honest. There isn't anything that I can consciously think about that I'm willfully, consciously disobeying other than in this area. And as I say to men, if you'll go to the mat on this one area and you deal with this the way God calls you to do on your watch, even though thousands, millions of other people are not, at the end of the day, we say, you know what? I can't control them, but I can make a decision about me and who I am and the man that I'm going to be before my family in Christ, and have that sense of confidence, though, that this is going to trigger God's unique involvement in your life. You have to have that sense of vision. Otherwise, you're just saying no rather than saying yes.
Wow. As much as we're seeing pornography just and hypersexuality overtake our culture in temptation, are you seeing success when it comes to, or at least maybe things getting better as far as people feeling more welcome to talk about their struggles and not keep this so secretive?
Oh, yes, yes, but there's a reason for that. I think, Celebrate Recovery, for instance. It used to be we had evangelism explosion training. Remember, you in the 60s and 70s, James Kennedy. I mean, the church was gathering to talk about how to share your faith. Now Christians gather together to talk about their addictions. There's been a complete shift in terms of the facility use on the part of churches across the country. That says a great deal about the level of addiction, but it also is a tribute to people's honesty. And I applaud that and I salute the integrity, but it also, I think, has to remind us that we no longer, in a sense, are an armory, we're a hospital, and we are now trying to bring healing. Well, if all of us are wounded, then we're not going to get on with the mission of Christ. And that's why I appeal to the individual. I can't appeal to the masses, but to the individual listening, you have to make a decision on your watch. Are you going to be an individual who is used for I love Paul said, fit for the master's use, because you have a sense of vision, and I'm going to pay the price, whatever I have to take to be one who walks in moral purity, because I love Christ and I'm asking God to help me. This isn't just a one-sided deal. The Lord will respond. But this is a challenge. And the honesty issue that you're talking about, Dan, is good, but it also reveals just the extent to which people are enslaved, that they're not even embarrassed. And I remember hearing, this testimony kind of increase. I'm thinking, it used to be we were ashamed to talk about it. And now more and more people are confessional. At one point I thought, that's just tremendous. But then I realized one day that's because they're so overwhelmed with this that there's no point in even lying about it. It completely dominates their life, and they're trying to get out of this mess. And that's a sad commentary at one level. But I believe that there's a way out, because God honors the humble, and we humble ourselves before Him. He will exalt us. But again, it comes down to the individual, not what everybody else is doing, but what you're going to do. And each of us has to make that decision, just as that pastor did that I referenced earlier.
I think you bring up a good point there, because it is kind of a two-edged sword. We do seem to be more comfortable talking about this as a problem, but how we're talking about it also impacts culture as well. We do know from statistics that more than 90% of teens and young adults talk about pornography in either positive or neutral terms. They don't even see that as a negative thing. So while there is more talk about this, unfortunately, in the majority of people, it is either in accepting or neutral, and that neutral is either, I think it's mostly indifference. It's mostly, well, we don't want to say that porn is bad or good. We're just going to kind of talk about it as an amoral type of situation.
Well, and I think this is a gender issue too, because, and I've been around men who've said, hey, I'm not doing it. I'm just looking at this, no big deal. There's a dismissive attitude. And as the years have rolled by, and I've talked to these people later, they knew they were lying right through their teeth. But the point is, it really comes down, even if you honestly feel that's no big deal, you get married and you ask your wife if she thinks it's a big deal. Mm-hmm. This is a huge, colossal issue among women. This is something that is so overwhelming to her. And one of the points I make at the conference, guy says, hey, it's no big deal, it's no big deal. And I say, okay, what if she came home and said, hey, Joe down the street just got his 5th promotion. He makes 10 times what you make. He looks like Atlas. He's been coaching his kids' soccer teams. They're national champs. And look at all the CEOs that gather every Saturday morning to get his counsel and wisdom. Look at those Mercedes around his house. Why don't you be more like him? You creep, you jerk. And I said, what would you feel? Well, guy said, that'd be a knife in my heart. When you look at pornography, you're putting a knife and sword right through the soul of your wife, but not just your wife. What happens when your daughter finds out about this? Gentlemen, there is no greater pain that comes. So if you have that dismissive attitude, hey, it's no big deal, let's just stop for a moment. This isn't just about you. This is about the women in your life. And I'm going to tell you, it is a big deal to them. And then when we stop, we all know, you know what? It is a big deal to them because it's a big deal. So I've said through the years, though, you know what it means to rationalize? These are rational lies. And again, this is where, some of you guys out there are saying, honest to God. You say honest to God all the time. Honest to God, honest to God, honest to God. My challenge is, why today aren't you just going to be honest to God and be honest before the Lord and saying, you know what? These are rationalized. I've been too dismissive of this. The truth is, I can't stop. And it's easier to give in. And this is one of the points that C.S. Lewis makes, and I make in my book, The Four Wills of God. The people who struggle with temptation are the ones who realize how big of a deal this is. The people who just give into it have given up. They're not fighting an enemy. So it's no big deal. Well, it's no big deal to you, but I'll tell you, Dan, and I'll say it's a big deal. I mean, I can't look at this stuff. God has hardwired me to respond to the anatomy of the female. And thank God for the difference, but he didn't call me to look at every woman unclothed. It's just going to destroy me, even though I want to do that. The spirit's willing, the flesh is weak. So I got to be honest about my flesh. And that's why Paul said, take heed, he who thinks he stands, lest he falls. And that's where many of us have made a decision. You know what? I don't have it in me to fight. I can't do this. I cannot give myself over to this and have a dismissive attitude and believe at the end of the day that I'm pleasing God, or believing that I'm going to ultimately be, find a family that's indifferent to him.
That's great advice. We're talking with Dr. Emerson Eggerichs. He is the author of Love and Respect. You can go to loveandrespect.com and pick up that new book, The Four Wills of God, that we've been talking lightly about today. Also, Doctor, wanted to talk about, we talked about the marriage perspective, but let's take it one step further. And this is mostly difficult because not only is it difficult to get this right in the marriage situation and relationship, but when it comes to children. What have you seen when it comes to this sexual temptation and how parents are training their kids, training that next generation to handle it?
Well, in terms of you mean the child's ability to access pornography via, let's say, an iPhone? Is that the question?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Or is it just the example that they need to be before their children, or both of those?
Mostly both, yeah. How do they pass on principles from their generation to the next generation?
That's right, and I think that's why it's so important for us to be humble in our demeanor, because the fact is, all of us recognize, particularly males, the reality of this temptation. So to shame our son in particular or whatever without any kind of empathy certainly is going to fly like a Led Zeppelin. But I think what we have to be is thoughtful about this, and there are many people giving a lot of good thought to this. Even the secularists now are kind of aligning, beginning to realize pornography is doing tremendous damage. So I think the idea of monitoring, and this is where Covenant Eyes is so powerful, and the technology that's available to guard us. And the idea is, are these fences to keep us in? Are they guardrails to prevent us from going off the cliff? And I see these as guardrails because there's a simple recognition that we are vulnerable. There's a weakness. But even so, there isn't anybody that I know that wants to drive around a curve without a guardrail. Mm-hmm. And should people be up in arms, I can't believe you put that guardrail there. Well, no, all of us make mistakes. There are innocent things we do. We could go off that cliff to our death. So it kind of is a protection. Well, the fact is your teen boy may be innocently looking for, White House or baby material and types in babes, and wham, it's just right there. And so the challenge for us is to think through as parents and not assume. And kids are far more street smart. They'll act like they're naive. They're not naive. I mean, this is more in the Lord. And I wrote a book on the family called Love and Respect the Family. Kids are very sophisticated about this, but they'll act like, they know nothing. I know nothing. And like Schultz, I know nothing. Well, the truth is they know a lot. And so the challenge here is for us to be sophisticated in technology, Covenant Eyes, and monitoring this, but always answering the question why. My daughter Joy and my sons have talked about answering why. Why are we doing this? And this is why I said earlier on, this is about experiencing God, being used of God, enjoying our relationship with our Heavenly Father, His presence, His peace, a sense of His purpose. The whole idea here is God there, and does He love us, and is He for us? And is this for the purpose of being used of Him and seeing fruit and getting excited about that? If all we're doing, as I say to people, hey, tell me when you stop thinking of the number 8. The minute you stop thinking of the number 8, raise your hand. And Dan, let me do it with you. Tell me when you stop thinking of the number 8. Stop thinking of the number.
I'm still thinking about it. It's hard.
That's exactly right. So you have to replace it with thinking of the number 9 or 10 or something like that. If we say to people, stop looking at pornography, stop, you're just going to reinforce the reality and the hunger of that. So we've got to shift from being reactive to proactive. That's the only way. One has to have a sense of vision. That's why we all love Billy Graham. He had a vision. And so many people that I've seen who beat this at the end of the day are individuals who made a decision that I'm going to be proactive. I'm going to pursue something. And I'm going to be excited about that and not let this interfere with that pursuit. But if we're bored, if we have no sense of mission, if we we feel trapped, if we feel depressed in our marriage, the enemy is going to come after you because you have no bigger purpose than yourself. And so that's part of why I've challenged people to look beyond this and answer the question, why would you want to say no to this? Because you're saying yes to something much bigger and much more worthy. But the temptation will still be there. Let's not kid ourselves.
We touched on those who are already married. We touched on those who are parents. And let's speak briefly to one more group of people, and those are those who are currently dating, or those who are maybe engaged and very close to being married. You know, they say that the best time to plant a tree was 30 or 40 years ago. The second best time is right now. And for those people who are dating right now, what advice would you give them to avoid a lot of these pitfalls and temptations as they get into marriage?
Well, my daughter Joy, for 10 years, she launched, we have Love and Respect, but she launched Love and Respect Now for the millennials. And she, Joy Eggerichs, Love and Respect Now, and she addresses a plethora of these kinds of issues. And the challenge that she extended is so well received, because part of the challenge for each of these young singles out there is they're prolonging marriage. And Paul's very clear, if you burn, you need to get married. And so how do we create this? You don't want to be premature in getting married, but you don't want to push this off so far, particularly if you have normal appetites and sexual desires. But we, again, talk about the issue of are you a mature person? Are you becoming the right person? Are you going to find a person who's mature? And are the two of you committed to a mission that's bigger than you? If you're mature, seeking a mature person, and you're both committed to a mission bigger than yours, then I believe you'll move through this as wisely as you can. And secondly, Joy always says, bring your relationship into the light. One of the main motifs and principles she extended is bring your relationship into the light. If you're unwilling to bring it into the light, that's an immediate indication that your conscience is bothered by something. You're acting contrary to what you believe your convictions are, or the worthy convictions of people that you respect. And she encouraged all of her friends and all those who viewed her, talk to people about these issues. There's a person out there that isn't going to relate with you. We've all been there. We may act as though we're the purest and holiest, but every one of us, in fact, I always say, if you don't have this desire for sexual intimacy, something's wrong. The relationship is inherently wrong. There should be an excitement. God designed you to want to come together like that. But there's that season where you're going to have to guard against that. And one of the ways you do that is bringing the light. But again, why? Because you want to be used of Christ. And again, it comes back to this idea. Is this an antiquated worldview, or is God there, Abba Father, Christ is his son, and this is real truth? This is a worldview that matters. I came to a point as a non-believer, non-Christian, I said, you know what? I'm going to align myself with Christ's worldview. And as it was Mark Twain said, it's not the things in the Bible that I don't understand that bother me. It's the things in the Bible that I do understand that bother me. And moral purity before God is a top priority issue, and it isn't silent. It's not a marginal issue. And I didn't come up with it. It was there before I was born. It's there. It'll be there after I'm dead. I'm irrelevant. I'm not trying to come up with this. I'm just saying I have to face it as you do. But once we do, things begin to happen that are so well worth the sacrifice that we might have to make.
We could go on for quite a while longer, but our time is gone, and we want to recommend to all the viewers that you go into the comment section below this video. You'll be able to get a link to all the books that Dr. Emerson had mentioned in our talk today. So we encourage you to go to loveandrespect.com, and also go to the comment section if you have a particular need, that one of his books will be able to meet that need. And we thank you so much, Dr. Emerson Eggerichs, for being with us today and making time for us.